When it comes to EVE Online, every player wants to know the most effective tactic available. You want to know the meta. The meta controls everything. It determines what will and will not happen. Knowing the meta will alter your views, make you question your reality. It might even make you laugh. And now, you're part of it. You're watching The Meta Show.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Meta Show. As you know, there is a war going on our side with this. If you watch the recent scope video that CCP put out with the update of the war here. Though today we're going to take a little bit of break from talking about the war because we're going to continue our FC roundtable series. We're going to talk to some of our guests today who've been in a nullsec, been in some block stuff, kind of stepped away from the game, whether stepped away from that side of the space, and learn, hey, what can we do to entice them back into that environment or entice them back into the game, and then how does Legion play into that? Does that look like a better situation? Also on that, I'm sure many of you, those of you in the Imperium, have heard Asher's Fireside today and the movement of goons to different places in the game and moving the front. We know as much as you do about that. Okay, we don't have any more additional insight or answers, but we're going to get that for you. And next week, we're going to spend some time next week. We're going to really go over that and some more detail and learn, hey, what does that mean for you as the Imperium? And what does that mean for the war? What does that do for us and how we're going to be able to project power and that kind of thing? But Dave, let's go ahead and we're going to move into our full story here and kick it off with, I'm going to let our guest here introduce themselves. So, Sir Quiz, I know him as Murray Rothberto. You want to introduce yourself for me, man?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Murray. One of the FCs for Rote Capel, an alliance that has been aggressively mid-tier, as we like to say, for many years at this point. We've bounced around in space from Tribute to Pochvin to Lowsec, and recently we've been balanced between some Lowsec content and fighting in the Great Wildlands.
Awesome. Thank you, Murray. And Kabul, thank you. I do not have enough cylinders. I only have 6 now. I've gone from 8, 6 to 4. It's an inside joke for those of you in Rote Capel. It's something I used to got a long time. Master, you're next, sir. Introduce yourself to our viewers.
Hey guys, sorry about the screaming kid in the background. I'm Master Gorfy, I'm a member of Intergalactic Space Hobos, and I go by MG. I'll be right back.
If you didn't know, that's actually Horde crying because of the beatdown they are getting from goons right now. That is live from the front lines. And Starfleet, go ahead, sir. Introduce yourself.
That was the best intro, that one.
It was.
Yeah, Starfleet Commander, Ruth on Volta, been around the game a bit. You might have seen us around at some point. And yeah, we've done a few things over the past 10 years, and now we're kind of back in Thera, just chilling at the moment.
Awesome. Back to the homeland of Thera, Volta. So be careful, you're heading Thera. Awesome. And as you know, myself, and then we've got Dave with me. And then also joining us, we have Young Puke, your Lowsec CSM, when you get into the chat. So let's go ahead and get, you've missed, looks like Starfleet, someone's missed your voice. You need to talk more and talk to Bear on a unicycle.
Maybe ex-B2 member potentially in Goons
Yeah.
now. I miss you too, Bear. I miss you too, man.
Awesome. All right, let's go ahead and get into this, everybody, and get into why we're here today. And the first question I'm going to have is with the Legion update, and we saw the reversal basically of surgical strike. Does this do anything for those of you, Murray, Starfleet Master? Does this do anything for you as far as exploring back, getting into maybe nullsec, bigger content, that kind of thing. Talk to us about that.
I can go first. Yeah,
Okay.
I'd say on the surface, yeah, obviously the sort of the rollback of the stats of the ships. We have like more tanky ships now, which does enable some sort of gameplay, makes things a bit easier for smaller groups to like fight outnumbered, etc. But I'm still dubious on like how it actually is going to change anything, mostly because a lot of fundamental things that I think, and we can get onto later on, haven't really changed that much, and they're still the same. But I think this reversal is good as a starting point.
Yeah, I'd second that.
Yeah.
I love the rollback.
Yeah, and just to like maybe clarify for folks who are unfamiliar with why, or one of the reasons that this rollback matters so much to groups like the ones that we've been a part of, is when you're a mid-scale group trying to fight in nullsec, right? The odds are you're going to be outnumbered. And when you're dealing with outnumbered fights, particularly heavily outnumbered fights, you cannot be playing a DPS race. I cannot say I just need to kill their ships faster than they kill mine, because if I'm outnumbered 2-1, I'm never winning that trade. I need to be able to go into fights with the confidence that if I play it correctly, my ships will stay alive while I'm killing the enemy. And so tankier ships allows for that to be the case in a lot of interesting situations where like I can keep my firewaller alive. I can keep my logistics ships alive even if I lose a couple DPS. Things like that are really important, and surgical strike matters a lot for that.
Do we see like, is there like compared to surgical strike, the way content played then, is there a need to escalate to capitals as soon? Like I know this is something that we've talked about on last shows. Like before the surgical strike impact, we had Haiwantu on here, and he stated you got to drop a fax, right? Logi stinks. It doesn't do anything. Do we see that now where with the reversal surgical strike, with the buff to Logi, that you can keep that like scale lower where you can stick to the subs? You don't have to commit caps sooner against like a bigger group, maybe like NC or Goons or somebody like that. Does that allow you to do that now?
I'd say like yes, but there's a fundamental issue with caps in a sense that if you are a mid-scale group and you're fighting, like for example, like Rote against NC, or like you're talking about you're in Great Wildlands, right?
Yes, sir.
Like you always know at the back of your mind that if they drop caps or they drop a fax, they've got more. They can kind of always win that that escalation. You could probably hold on with your sub caps, but I feel in today, especially in the way that the map is laid out, that most alliances, there's so many caps in the game now that like you can, especially if you're a larger alliance and you're fighting a mid-scale alliance that's smaller than you, only has sub caps, you can just wave that around if you want to at any point in a fight. So yeah, I feel like for mid-scale content, especially now, you have to be kind of careful who you go up against, and you have to be very tactful to like either bait an escalation and then make them waste time, or do it in such a way that where they're not necessarily in range of their caps and stuff. I do think that the logi buffs are really good, and we're sort of testing some stuff out from there and things, and it's definitely an improvement. But I still think that the new projection in this game is subcaps, not caps. That's my opinion. I think we go back to when we all remember when there was like 100 Archons being jumped around by PL, and that was like the Pantheon fleets was like the projection in EVE Online, and now it's not that. It's how many subs you have. I think obviously everyone wants to use their supers and stuff to like bring the hammer down, but a lot of groups are scared to use them. I think they only want to do it if they really believe they're going to win. I don't know if anyone else agrees with me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Where
so
like
going
if like for example, prior to this war, if someone had wanted to take space from Horde in Insmother, even though Insmother was 3.5 regions away from where they actually lived, it was not that Horde had caps or supers in the area. It was that they would be there with 300 Feroxes and a group with 50 pilots on field can't do anything about that.
And
Puke on
building
anyone.
off both of your ideas, going up big with your ideas. At FanFest, I don't know, Starfleet and Murray, if you've seen this, they actually showed how many dreads were built in the past year, and it was like 40,000 dreads, something like that, and like 60% of them were basically whatever the numbers were. Basically, 60% of dreads were dying, sort of. But like you have these massive stockpiles of people with capitals, and they just keep replacing them endlessly. If you're a group of 400 people, you don't have those types of resources compared to, let's say, goons or horde, right? So being escalating to capitals, I think now post Legion, since you're not, it has to be more it's tactfully planned, right? It's not like how it was pre-Legion, where you always have to go to facts, like subcap logi. I mean, our Zarms now tank 290k EHP with high grade amulets and dead space fit lows, basically. I mean, that was the tank of a Typhoon before, and it has a sig of like a pear or an apple. It is so tiny, and so like I agree with you both that it's easier to punch up, but over time, the amount of resources these larger groups have combined with projection makes it a lot more difficult for smaller groups to punch up.
I completely agree. Like a good example was when we fought Big Ab in LoSec last year. And at that time, Volta had a big dread fleet, but because we like built one during B2, but that was the dread fleet. That there was no replacement. Do you know what I mean? Like we didn't have for like there was loads of ISK to have replacements and stuff. So like it's so difficult for groups to like catch up to become on the same level playing field for like big groups and stuff. And also for major groups, it's a money thing. Like that's why you're seeing, cheap fleets in nullsec and stuff just to get the objective one. They don't want to waste. I mean, a lot of dreads die because they are cheaper than supers and stuff, and they're kind of like, from a strategic perspective, like it's better to have like loads of dreads than put supers on grid because you kill it. It's less money. They do way more damage, and if you kill like a couple of supers, like you're already up on ISK at that point. So that's why I think today this subcaps are still will dominate for a long time, just in terms of projection and ease of use, and also keeping it simple for members as well. Like Ferox is easy to get into, cheap. You can just keep building them. If you die, it doesn't matter. I mean, most wars that we've seen now, and especially during B2 and Frat, it was just like who could replenish their subs fast enough to then drop caps to then secure the grid. So subs are the main thing,
I will
I have-
say for groups that are of a bit of a smaller scale, right? Where I think Rote is definitely on the smaller end of what would, most people would qualify as mid scale. We, I think, have an advantage generally in dropping caps compared to larger groups. We're not terribly pressed for issues on replacing them. We're at a scale where like there's multiple different buyers we know, either just via friends or a couple internal folks with stuff set up in various places in the universe that we can get more if we need them. If we wiped our fleet, we can get a new one. But because our members are generally wealthier and more experienced, even though we're not exactly handing out SRP like candy for dreads, as long as we're willing to take fights that are okay-ish, people are happy to get them replaced. Whereas like when NC loses 200 billion in dreads fighting like AMC, I know that AMC probably had those replaced faster than NC did, because NC had to SRP everything, and because it's all SRP money, Alliance leadership is very hesitant to ever throw those dreads around again. Whereas AMC, like one guy lost like 6 Zerns, and like a week later he was like, my Zerns are ready again. You're like, excuse you? But
Well, so here's, and I think resources in the game, is a good point. Like there's a lot of them, right? There's a lot of resources. And for a group like Rote necessarily, yes, you guys, there's a lot of old money there, can definitely replace stuff very easily. The thing I hear about, and we've touched on a little bit, Starfleet said it a little bit, we talked about it a lot in our last roundtable, is projection. Do we feel like projection is a problem in the game? Did that attribute to the fall of B2? Did that attribute to Rote getting kicked out? Attribute? I'd like to hear about your thoughts on projection.
Do you want me to go first?
I can
Go
start.
for it.
Murray,
Yeah.
you wanna go yeah, no,
My
how about
opinions are lined up.
you go
Go
first,
for it.
because no, let's talk about Rote first, because that is
I think
before
it.
B2.
So I will say,
Yeah.
projection had very little to do with us in tribute, right? Frat was moving directly in on top of us. There
Yeah.
was nothing
Yeah,
there
that's true.
projection related. Like they were gonna kick us out either way eventually, and that's fine. Like I'm not gonna be like a 2,000 person group shouldn't be able to kick us out from right next door. Where projection comes in for me is when I look at the map right now and I say I want to go fight in nullsec, maybe take some space, that'd be cool. But like specifically, like where can I go and fight in nullsec with like 100 people and like actually have a chance of winning without somebody just getting called over? And whenever I ask people to look at the map and tell me, no one has a good answer because they look at the map and they look at where the jump bridge networks go and they say, yeah, you go to Pure Blind, but Frat's right there. You could go to someplace in the east, but even before Goons, like before anyone moved in, Horde are 10 jumps away, Goons are 10 jumps away. There's no angle.
It's the
And
exact same
so
discussion Hobos had when we got evicted.
it's like you look at the map and there's nowhere to go because projection covers the entire map.
There's no geography.
Yeah, and that was
Starfleet, I'll let you.
it was a key problem with fighting in against Fraternity and to a later extent Horde as well. Is like they for a long time, especially Horde, like didn't even need to be anywhere near. Like they could just get a bunch of jump bridges and be in a fight at any point. So like Mario, you're completely right. You have to, even when you get into a fight and you start dropping caps and things start getting serious, you've now got to think, okay, we're locked in here, right, Mario, for like 20 minutes
You're on a
maybe
timer.
in a fight. Like, and that is plenty of time for everyone to come, and not just and goons and in it as well, because there was many fights in the north where before we got goons involved. And at the beginning we didn't, and if anyone wants to disagree, that's fine. But it's true. We didn't. The goons were not involved, but obviously, like in it would turn up. I can't really stop Shines from turning up to anything. If he was to turn up, he would turn up. But we have to be. Sorry, Karen. Someone said something. No, but we have to be super careful fighting Fraternity and stuff because as soon as we wanted to lock down a fight, which we wanted, but we had to be really careful of caps and getting them on grid because we knew that as soon as we dropped them, we have to drop them and then pretty much extract immediately because everything on grid is going to die at some point. I do think that we've just shifted away from they sort of solved the previous issue, which was like the capital projection issue from like 10 years ago, which was a huge problem. The jump ranges and stuff. I think most people here were there for that. And that was like huge, like people just jumping around the map and just being anywhere at once. But now we've just shifted to a subcap stream through jump bridges that just enables like unparalleled movement across the game. And as soon as you have groups that are okay, not necessarily completely aligned, but Panfam Fraternity at the time were like basically blue, Imperium and Initiative all together. So you have these big parts of the game that are just completely linked up, which is the problem, obviously. But we have to, the game is so long, communities form, everyone bands together, and people get to know each other, and it's a social game. People become friends, and those bonds don't break, and it in turn makes everyone want to stay together on either side. Which then makes the jump bridge network massive, right?
Yeah. And
Hey, Delva's
speaking
going to open up,
particularly-
by the way.
Speaking particularly to the recent changes around jump bridges, because obviously they've eaten some nerfs. Those nerfs, I think, targeted very specific things rather than chain jumping projection. But like, particularly as the smaller group, one of the most frustrating things to me is people making arguments of like, oh, well, now you can disrupt them. You can either ref them or have, a bunch of characters that are waterboarding them with bubbles and Hictors on gates so like they can't get to you as fast. I don't know where people think I'm getting an extra 20
I was about to
characters
say,
or
where are
10
these people coming
humans
from?
to go just like maybe stop Horde from coming. Like I don't even know if Horde is coming, but maybe they are. And so I need to take 20% of my fleet and send them off to go do something. I don't
Not just
have
that.
those
You
spare
need
people.
another 20% to stop goons.
Exactly.
I mean, not just that, right? Like to build up even further, Murray. Like recently in low sec, we get a lot of times we get like null people coming into low sec, and I've heard the talking point where they're like, oh, well, just ref their ANSIs before your time. We have a timer before, and so they can't come. And I'm like, what do you mean? They got wormholes. They flash forms. I don't even know if they come. They don't need a pre-ping like small groups do to like tell people when they need to be there. They instantly ping. They'll get a full fleet or 100 people in a fleet. So like I have to preemptively ref their jump bridges in case they come to low sec. What? Like how am I supposed to know? And it's the goalposts keep moving. But I think what it does help, which we were camping in Anstey yesterday with Rote actually, and like it's easy, fun kills, but it doesn't stop the most pressing issue, which is like the long-term projection, which is you can get 100 plus 150 Feroxes through extra large wormhole, and be able to show up anywhere across the grid very easily. Or Ansiblexes, which we all, I think, more or less also agree on as well.
If you've got a big resourceful group, you could literally just shove shuttles through because you've already put the ships in the position.
Yes.
Dave, your mic. Yeah, your
Yeah,
mic's super quiet.
He's talking about shuttles, I think, and you can just move shuttles around the game really easily.
Bingo, there we go. My system was being done. Yeah, so if you're worried about one of the big groups, then that you make it difficult for them. They're just gonna preemptively set up and move a fleet of shuttles through to the ships that are already in position to form the fleet.
Yeah.
I mean, the game is the game that the Eve is the same size, it's just less in it. There's just less going on, so all groups are just looking for the content. I actually wanted to talk about because I know we spoke about faxes and escalations and stuff, and dreads and all that sort of stuff. I actually do think that, in my opinion, I think that faxes, their whole role is wrong, and that they shouldn't be used with subcaps. The design of the ship, like that's the way I see it, because like before faxes didn't exist, you had like triage archons, right? And they were kind of like multi-role stuff. But you could faxes just made it so like, okay, now you drop a fax, now basically any battleship or whatever you won't kill with subcaps. Do you know what I mean? Like it forces another side to escalate, which is true. But if you're a mid-scale group and you go up that chain like Murray does in against NC and stuff, it's a dangerous game that you have to play against. I think that my opinion is like faxes introducing to the game was terrible. I think it's not a good idea to do that. As soon as they came out, as soon as they got released, I was like, oh god, not a good addition to Eve at all.
We did put together some very specific like tech counters of like if NC, which to be fair, I don't think they could have actually capital escalated on us in USTZ. I think they would have lost. But like we had tools of like we don't want to drop caps. How are we dealing with facts? Um, and I do think it is possible if you are willing to like fly certain compositions that can take a couple of Balgorns, that can bring the kind of like heavy armor tools or bushing tools or whatever else you want to use to disrupt facts. You absolutely can. And I love that part of the game because once you start dipping into the E-War, things like Stormbringers, things like Boosh runs, etc., that's where I can make my like better individual pilots on my side really shine. Where I have the people who can juggle Balgor newts across 4 targets and make their life pain and do things like that.
And that, Murray, I was going to ask real quick, do you feel like with the newest update and with the direction CCP seems to be going, that makes that game style, that gameplay more viable now than it used to be?
I mean, it already was prior to the Legion changes. We've cooked some very specific technology. There's a couple battle reports where we have a Nestor wing out in GW.
Mm-hmm.
But like I think in particular, the main important change that really shifted it in a good spot for us is the shift to there actually being a spot for battleships in the chain again. When they killed the Munin and largely killed hacks, that made life a lot better for us because
No, Union changes were great. Long
like
overdue.
the shift to Cyclone fleets and Ferox navies, there are infinitely more counters I can pull out of my ass if people are going to just throw those at me. And I can make people suffer for making that choice, particularly when I have heavy battleship options available to me. Whereas before, I didn't have that choice. Once the enemy had 100 Munins, well, whatever I put on grid was going to die.
I do think that like I was looking at battle reports like yesterday and for like the last couple of months, and there is like a decent variation of doctrines and stuff around, which is nice for subcaps. I even saw like was it Initiative doing like Ishtars or something. Obviously, Feroxes are quite prevalent everywhere. Every group will find the most economical, viable doctrine that they can just throw out there. I just think that the numbers game, like you said, Murray, like the Munins, you're right. Like when it was just 100 Munins, you're just like, well, you're dead, right?
Here's a question I have, and we've spent a good minute talking about here's where our problems are, right? One of the issues, and I'm going to go back to projection here because I am curious on your thoughts on it. I would agree. Like, I think projection, in my experience, Murray, I flew with you for a long time. I wrote, see it firsthand. Like, yeah, anybody can get anywhere pretty easily. What would be the solution? In a solution that's not necessarily, this is great for a small group or a mid-sized group like Road or whatever, or Volta, but a solution that is like, hey, it's going to have its advantages for bigger groups because being in Goons now, I can see the advantage to, hey, you want to be able to get and move and protect your space and what CCP's done with the gate. What kind of solutions would you guys suggest that would help solve this projection problem?
I mean, it's a balance though, really, because you want to make
Yeah.
it so it's a really hard balance that CCP would have to do in terms to make it worthwhile to have that you could. Yeah, you don't want to make it like impossible to move around your own space or like it's a nightmare because everyone will just like turtle up and no one would do anything. But at the same time, you want to make it so like you kind of have to deploy somewhere and commit resources to be somewhere, and that you can't just like be everywhere all at once. And I I've thought about this for a while, and at the moment I don't really have a massive answer. There are some like fatigue things you can do, but Dave said you can just get shuttles, just burn them around, and have pre-stayed ships around. There's loads of ways around it, but I think what CCP needs to think about is trying to make it so, for example, in the War of B2, like force fraternity and horde to if they want to actually fight, they have to deploy stuff. They can't just be at home in their staging systems at home and literally just like do a war like 3-4 regions over. That's the issue. How to go around fixing that is a really difficult question that the CSM would need to be talking about. I'm hoping they are, and trying to make it so like if you're going to commit to something, you have to commit resources and kind of sacrifice. Well, I'm going to have to move most of my player base to the front lines to fight. That's what needs to be done somehow.
Yeah.
I mean, right
No,
now
100%.
like right now during the war that we're seeing, right, which being neutral and objective, like the ability of Horde to attack delve at the same time as their own space is burning, I just doesn't make sense to me. Like
I think
you're
it should be
gonna be
possible though. I think
it should be possible.
but it should be hard. Like if you want to
It
use,
should be
you
hard,
use
exactly.
wormholes and things, that's fine. But I know what you mean. It's like a prolonged thing, right? And if you want to
Yeah.
sacrifice a certain group in your alliance to go and live there to do it, that's fine. You have to commit players to go and do that. But I think you're right. It's too easy at the moment. That's the issue.
Yeah, and so like how do you make it harder? Let's say like I like next week or during our CSM meeting, like I think about these same questions. It's like, well, you have NPC space there, right? And like maybe that's just a trade-off, right? Like Delve used to be like one of the best areas of space because it did have that NPC region there before Equinox and everything. Um But now it's just like how, like, even if you nerf wormholes, like I feel flat-footed because, like, sure, you can nerf wormholes, you can nerf fancies, which doesn't really make a difference in this scenario, but you can just stage ships and no, I forgot the system where they stage out of
PR tackle
an NPC delve,
FWST.
but
I think
yeah.
wormholes are fine. I think like if they want to do that, you want to. The problem is that you want to, for that situation, whether fighting in Delve, whatever, you want to encourage asymmetrical travel to do that.
Mhm.
Not like if there's any way of getting there directly, very easily, then that shouldn't be a thing. Like I think you want to encourage groups to there is NPC there. Obviously, and goons can do that to the drone lands, but to a lesser effect, right? Because there's no NPC, so they have to kind of either stage out of citadels or just be hit and run attacks and stuff. And that is a trade-off of Delve having NPC that people can just stage there. I think
Mhm.
I don't think you should discourage that. It just should be more of a commitment.
So like,
Yeah, I mean, I
for
think
example, oh sorry, because I mean, let me ask you guys one question then. Would increasing the commitment be that, which I'm not endorsing it, this is just an idea. Jump clones reactivation timers increase from, say, 24 hours or whatever it is with the skills, like 20 hours. You make it a week.
I think that
I
would
would hate
hinder
that, but
individual people playing the game more than it would solve
yeah.
any sort of projection issue. That would be you're gonna make people quit the game.
Yeah, that would be a log off moment of I want to go do something, and then I go to
Okay.
clone, and it's next week, and it's all right,
Because
bye.
that's to me, that's the monkey paw, right? It's like, oh, they're jump cloning over to whatever, and they're hazing this space. All right, jump clones gone.
You'll
Week.
never.
You can
But
swap in
so
and
for
out.
me, right, the way I would think about it, right, is this is people like to complain that geography doesn't matter sometimes. This is a point where geography really does matter, and it's something you should be thinking about as a large group. Right? If I'm a very large group, I'm going to be taking up, like Brave does, 2 whole regions of space. I'm going to want those regions to be relatively hard to access for people who aren't me, because I'm big enough that I can defend the Logi chain to wherever I'm getting my logistics from the high sec. Whereas for if I had a 100-person group and I just wanted to live in a constellation, then Delve would be great because I have this easily accessible NPC space. My logistics are always going to be safe. I always have an NPC jump chain station to low sec or wherever I need to evac to. So it's a great spot for me, but it's not a great spot for a group that is going to get blopsed on all the time because they're very big and they have a lot of new members. And so for them, maybe they want to go live in Esoteria. Maybe they want to go live in Faith Abylis, somewhere
Why do you
that
think goons are
is
moving
much
where they're
easier to
moving?
defend.
When Goons lived in Dav, the only reason why it was so defendable is just because of the organization. That's it, the size of us and
Exactly.
the organization behind it. But as recently shown, not everybody can live in Dav. It's a very tricky place to maneuver due to jump ranges and the NPC space. And then you've got low sec and so many regions connected to it.
Goons also did that when the home defense umbrella was comically broken.
Oh, we did it when it comically wasn't broken as well.
Incredibly powerful.
Also, real quick though, and here's something I want to interject. Goons left. Goons went. We are staged in ULX now. We're going to move again. We're also going to be the Imperium's pulling Brave out of Delve, right? Horde is leaving their space. Well, not Innsmother. They've left that. Somebody mentioned it in the chat earlier. Everybody's leaving. Horde's not really fighting over their space. Horde did throw up a defense for their Keepstar, ended up losing that on the armor timer. And then Goons is basically essentially Imperium's pulling Brave out of there. Everybody's going to consolidate and come together more. What can CCP do to create objectives to put people to say, I want to fight over the space? Because it seems like the answer most of the time when you get invaded, pretty much to just back up and go somewhere that you can defend and not actually try to fight over any of the other infrastructure you put down.
That's kind of what Horde
And that's where I have a question.
Can I hijack this question a little bit? Because I think
Yeah.
I'm particularly interested in what Starfleet has to say on this. Because for smaller groups, like the ones we're talking about here that have left nullsec, most of us ran alliances that were largely single time zone. I think we're late US,
Yeah.
Hobos, if I recall, is early US. Volta was obviously EU. And one of the biggest pains is that a lot of places in space are not on the same time zone you are, especially if you're US. And fighting across time zones is often super difficult. And so I'd be specifically interested in the changes that like Starfleet would be curious about, or I have a couple of ideas in my head as well, like where the biggest pain points are there. Because I think there are ways to make it better without just making it so, people can't fight in their own time zone.
I think
Yeah.
ADMs was like introducing like the ADMs was good. I just think that the current way, like the soft system, I think probably needs to be changed in terms of how things are captured. And I don't have any answers for that. I do think that time zone tanking is like time zone warfare and like setting your timers is like the number one important thing in any conflict that all these groups are doing. It's a time zone war. It's like you set your time to like your biggest time, the enemy would set them to their biggest time, and you're kind of okay. Now we have to like for you guys, Murray, if you're fighting, EU people, it's like you've all got to log on like 6 hours early, potentially during the week, during work hours or whatever, or for when we fought Frat, we'd have to log in the morning at like 9 a.m. to try and take a system. I think again, it's such a delicate balance where you can't, you know, debuff people because of where they live. Like, you can't be like, oh, you live. I think it's an inherent thing that is going to persist in Eve and will never go away. The only I don't know. I feel like and I think someone mentioned early on. It is heavily stacked in defenders, which is why everyone doesn't. They're gonna.
Attack.
Yeah, pretty much. Like they're gonna. PanFam have seceded all their territory into Mother because they don't. It's always been just like a waste of time for them, and they know that they can just sit in drones, let goons take it all, and just that's it. For let's say goons try to go into drone lands, it's gonna be very very difficult to do that because of time zone as well.
So this matters less for like big set piece fights over individual systems, but I do have one component that I think would help this problem a lot, Starfleet specifically related to ADMs, which is that the way ADM windows are currently calculated is by division. It is
Yeah.
the window starts at 18 hours, which is insanely wide, and they divide that number by the ADM, which means that an ADM of 2, which is the ADM you get by just owning a system and doing literally nothing for 30 days, cuts the window down to 9, which is functionally a single time zone. Maybe a little bit wider than maybe, but like pretty close to a single time zone. But then the difference between an ADM of 4.5 and an ADM of 6 is like an hour or two on the window, completely irrelevant. If you switch that to like subtraction, essentially, where like every additional ADM was like minus 2.5 hours or 2 hours roughly, then suddenly you have systems that are very heavily used, still very much within the defender's window, quite a narrow window. But for systems that are barely used, ADMs somewhere between 2 and 4, which by the way, guess what a lot of renter systems are because they only mine or only rat, and a lot of systems that people are in the floodplains, low ADMs, those systems are suddenly attackable across time zone, whereas now they currently are not.
I completely agree. With that. Like, it should be skewed. So like if you are heavily using a system and it's like 5 and 6, then yeah, it should be probably skewed to your time zone. But I agree. Like if it's 1, 2, or 3, it should be pretty wide because that 1, 2, and 3 means the system's like sort of used. 1 and 2 is like no, it's not being used really.
One thing I will touch on as well is due to the way ADMs work, it's heavily skewed towards the defender in the first place, let alone the vulnerability window, just the actual hacking event of doing the nodes is heavily skewed towards the defender. I mean, there's a lot of times where we've been like, well, we don't actually need to bother defending this because it's just gonna, we do a couple of nodes and boom, we're done because we can do it quicker than they can. Real quick, segue topic a little bit. I'm going to address something I saw in chat. I'm just gonna say because I can't resist. It's a bit rich to see Horde talking about blobbing after what they did in Delph. Pot kettle. Anyway, back to Sov.
So here's the question though. We
So-
talk about time zone taking being heavily, skewed towards the defender, or anything where it would be ADMs and that kind of thing. But why aren't the defenders fighting over it? We can say this, and CCP can go look at a current war that's going on, and Horde hasn't really. I mean, there's been some structured defense, but outside of that, Dave, you correct me if I'm wrong. There really hasn't been any resistance to going and attacking the ADMs and that kind of thing. So, what drives Murray, Starfleet, you guys? What is your motivation to go attack those timers while you're doing it? When I was in Rote, like if we would go troll someone's Sov, it was we wanted to get them to come out and fight. We wanted a good fight. We would leave and be on our way. But what drives that? And like, what is the motivation for them to even go and defend it or anything along those lines?
Ooh, I actually have a really good answer to this, which we can use Northern Coalition dot as an example here. Larger groups like Goons, like Horde, particularly when they're fighting groups that are a bit smaller, but they will do this to each other as well. The way you see the path to victory is you see I kill the capital. I knock out their staging, and then they can't defend anything else because they aren't able to form fleets effectively. And so all that stuff becomes a side effect. I can do it later. I can take the system ADMs, I can, flip the Sov, do whatever else kind of on my own time because I've knocked them out. Whereas for a group my size, odds are I'm not killing someone's staging Fortizar off the bat. I need to get them to give up before that point. I need to make it so they can't rat. I need to make it so they can't mine. I need to make it so they can't live there. And so while they might still be sitting in that Fortizar, they've stopped defending because they've lost the war. And NC, when they first came to GW, for like the first 2 weeks, all they did was RFR staging Fortizar over and over. Even once, like, eventually they realized that they, in fact, could not kill it, and they started shooting things that were actually more attackable, like moon drills and Athenors and whatever else. But, like, you could see in their philosophy of if we're fighting this group, the first and most important thing we're supposed to do is kill their staging citadel. Even though the fact it was still in an NPC station system. So, like, didn't do anything, even if they did win. But that was what they were trying to do at the start of the war. And I think large groups very much follow that mindset when they think about how to fight, whereas smaller groups have to go at the smaller targets first.
I also think that, like, just I was touching on what I said earlier about changing the capture system. Like, I do think, like, no one likes intosising. Come on. They don't actually like
You
doing
say that under your
intosising.
breath, like no one likes.
No one likes it. It's rubbish. It's boring.
Yeah.
Like, I do miss, like, shooting, Sov stuff. I mean, Dominion had its flaws, and you're dropping in, what is it, the inhib beacons on all the gates and all that stuff. You had to cover half the gates, whatever the hell. SBU, someone put in chat, thank you. Like, that was a bit whatever. Like, it's kind of crap. But what was nice about that system is that it kind of forced a fight in a system. And I don't like the way that things get scattered around. It just promotes more people. The more people you have to like go around in jackdaws and kill in toasters. There is some fun gameplay there to like to battle things, but I just think that there's no like point of fight in the system for that system. Like you could maybe have the beacon spawn in the system, so you had to warp around in the system and stuff, and actually fight on multiple grids in the system. So then you had more interesting gameplay in the system where you had like multiple fleets and different, I don't know, like arenas or whatever. I think like people taking Sov should be more engaging, not just pressing a button with a little laser beam and then waiting for a bit. I think that's
So-
very boring.
10 minutes.
Like, not just that, but I don't think there needs to be only one way to take or attack Sov. I think we have like very diverse player bases, even like maintaining ADMs. Like, for example, like I know many of our alliances, we're not really crabs, but we rely ADM systems, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, require on certain activities such as ratting or mining or whatever, which groups, right? Is that correct? Right? Just making sure that I'm on the same page.
Yep.
Yep. Yeah. Okay.
Most
But
of it is ratting and mining.
yeah, most of it's ratting mining, but my group doesn't rat or mine. I'd love to take Sov. I'd love to attack and own a constellation or two, but I don't want to rat or mine. I want to kill shit. right?
other-
And so like having alternative systems, whether to take Sov, which I thought what was going to happen in Equinox was that they were going to, because they hinted about it during FanFest, was we're going to take the lessons that we learned from faction warfare and put faction warfare plexes into null and make people fight over mini plexes, and that's how you take a system or something, right? It's
I've heard
constant.
that
It's
Okami is
24/7. There
working
is
on
no
a new
time.
sub. Sorry for interrupting.
Yeah, Okami publicly mentioned those Okami Sov, maybe whatever. I mean, we'll see. Like, no spoilers from me. Not gonna break an NDA. But the the idea is that like it's constant. It's 24/7. You have PvP at different scales. Like you can put 1,000 people in a plex or 100 feroxes in a plex. Well, guess what, buddy? There's small plexes, novice plexes, and large plexes, and you got to adapt. And it's boring. It's boring. What people are gonna get bored because they're not gonna get any fights. Um, and I don't know, like a more different systems. Like I feel like when I had to Entosis or whatever, it is dull and it's boring. But having multiple ways for attackers to attack, I think just make it more interesting. And so maybe somebody wants to do it a classical way, a classical Sov warfare, where you Entosis. Maybe you decide to do a siege and you siege a system, and that's a Plex style warfare. Um, like I just think having more options on the table versus like this is the way you must do it. I think it becomes too reductive.
Yeah, I really agree with you
Especially
too.
for
That one of the questions you guys keep asking is like, what changes would make you guys interested in coming back to nullsec, and multiple new siege systems to try would be something that would make hobos get back out there for sure.
Yeah, and shifting the ADMs would definitely be
One
like
of the
making it so if it's not being used, like you should be able to take it relatively easily.
Another big issue with ADMs is some of the systems that don't have asteroid belts. You actually have to put down a moon drill, wait for that to frack. Actually, just can't get the mining ADM up either, which then is harder for a smaller group. Yeah, goons, we could litter the system every moon and just pop it in like 2 days and job done. But for a smaller group, you then have to defend the Athanors until they frack to be able to raise that ADM whilst also defending the system.
and
Yeah,
Dave to
pain
build
in
up
the
on
dick.
in
Unless you're trying to get
hobos.
it, unless you're trying to get it to 6, that doesn't really matter because you can just do ratting and that'll get it
But
to 4,
having
and that'll be
both of
enough
them up's
for.
good.
It's
But
nice,
not
but 4 will do most of the job. I'd say that's a pretty minor point at the bottom of the list, so to speak.
And this is a question that I don't know either. And actually, somebody said in chat, like for PvP centric groups, right? Like I know for hobos, when hobos were having Sov, there's a gentleman named Let Us Dig. He basically, right? Dig was ratting basically tons to raise ADMs. One guy multi-boxing. Is that right, Glorfy? MG?
Yeah, it was centered around Dig's activity.
Yeah, and so like that's like one person in a small group basically had to keep up an alliance's ADMs. Like if there were passive ways that you have to defend structures for PvP centric groups, let's say Metanox, like a pseudo Metanox that maybe it has fuel costs or whatever, helps raise your ADMs, so you don't have to put in endless man hours. So like you're an alliance of 200 to 400 people that nobody wants to mine in the first place, or maybe it spawns hostile rats, or I don't know, something that would encourage more PvP centric groups to then take a constellation and null.
I
We were
think
able to say,
the
sorry, go ahead.
question that you're asking is basically, and I guess it's the first, if we go right to the beginning, what the attackers want to do. Do they want to take the Sov, make a big alliance? Are they just doing it for content? Or like you said, are they just a PP centric group that just want to take the Sov and leave afterwards? I think the goal of that group individually will determine what their ambitions are, obviously, and like in turn, for example, when we took Sov in the north, like my Volta does not want to we had like a few people that wanted to rap, but we are a PvP centric alliance, so we thought, okay, we're going to build another alliance to do the Sov holding, right? But not everyone can do that, and I think in this current game that it is right now, you can't do that anymore. Like there's, like Murray said earlier on, like there's like nowhere to go, right, Murray? Like to take Sov in this game.
Yeah.
I think
If
there's
we were giving
nowhere.
my issues like a percentage per issue, that projection based component is like about 80% of why I'm not currently trying to take someone's Sov.
What is like what is the driver to even want to take Sov, right? Why does a group and that's it really, like, when I'm an individual, and even when, and I spent a lot of time, obviously, over 3 years I was in Rote, like, and we talked about it, and Tribute was fun to have it, but where we were in Tribute, right, when we had Sov as Rote, it was there. It started as a joke, and free real estate, right? And then it was a bait beacon, and we positioned ourselves in a manner to, it was easy for us to get to different content. That was what, correct me if I'm wrong, Marie, that was what drove us being there. It was, we were centric to other content. We could get to other places quickly. We were only one jump range, that kind of thing. So when it comes to groups going back to nullsec, a lot of the bigger blocks and stuff, they go to nullsec because it's what they're able to sustain themselves. Players can sustain themselves with ratting and mining and that kind of thing. But is there a driver for these smaller groups, maybe like Volta or even Rote again? What would drive you to get back to nullsec? Why do you even want to be there?
Sov is incredibly valuable right now.
Yeah.
Like, at a group income level, between Skyhooks, Metanoxes, and what's the stupid thing for Deathless ships?
Mercden.
Merc Dents.
Mercdens, yeah. Between the three of those, like, single constellations are putting out more money per month than, like, we spend on most things as, like, a mid-scale alliance currently. Like, it is worth owning space. When they added Skyhooks, like, that was an additional, like, trillion ISK per month boon to the large blocks that have multiple regions. Like, massive amounts of income are coming from these things. And, you don't need that much of it in order to sustain yourself as a mid-scale group. And on top of that, they've also made the personal income functionally as good as it's ever been. Ratting is in an absolutely fantastic spot right now with the additional escalations, with the additional what have you. Mining is getting to a point that it's good now with the T3 sites.
Yeah.
And then obviously there's crab beacons, although those are kind of a joke for a mid-scale group. They're kind of irrelevant. But, like, personal income is also good. It is worth owning Sov right now.
There's a lot of
We talked about, I was going to say, we talked a lot about, projection, and we touched on NPC stations, and somebody in chat was like, I want a ability to shoot NPC stations to turn off services, which that reminds me of back when, Sov used to be the way it was, and you could, in Tosis or whatever the heck it was, you could reinforce the services on player-owned stations. And nullsec, is that something at all? And I'm more just doing this, just engaging with the chat here. And I know that's been a headache with why I think Brave's getting moved out of Delve, why Goons left Delve, is NPC stations located there. Is there anything in your guys' opinion that needs to be done to address that at all?
So I think it's a safety. Sorry, I think NPC station. Go ahead. This is, everyone knows my opinion. Go ahead.
No,
Starfleet.
say.
All right, I think stations are fundamental safety nets. What I think what makes it more risky or interesting for attackers is that right now the way that acid safety works is that you pay a 5% fee. And so how do we get more
15%.
people to fight? 15%. Thank you for the correction. And what happens, what I think, is that for an attacker benefit, let's say I attack a staging fort, and there's a couple groups or whatever, or the people not really defending their structures anymore. That acid safety fee becomes a bounty fee for attackers. The attackers, when the defenders have to then transfer their structures to either NPC stations or another nullsec station, they have to pay that fee. Part of that fee goes to the attacker's pockets. And so then you actually have income for these attacking groups that want to live in NPC null regions or areas that want to attack and siege soft structures. And that when these structures go into asset safety, they get paid. And that's like then a whole new layer or avenue for mid-scale groups like Rote or Volta or Hobos or Sedition that can then deploy to these NPC null regions and start hazing them. And then you get paid for it too. and like stations is in that safety net, but you get the lucrativeness of living in null, but at the same time you also have the risk. There's more risk involved. It's an idea, but has its positives and negatives.
Can I
But I
ask,
think it
like, what
creates
is?
more.
No, go.
No, go ahead. That was it.
I was going to say, what is everyone's opinion on NPC space? Are people pro it? Do you think
I
there's
think
not
it's
enough of it?
good because it stops people from sitting in 100% safety. For instance, one of the big topics is drones has none, and they're able to sit there in 100% safety. Now, I would probably still be harping on about that if I lived in drones because it would just make life bloody boring. But having a way to prevent people from using those NPC stations, say for 12 hours or a day, by like, I don't know, shooting it and it becomes a wreck. I'm not saying it disappears, but you make it inoperable. You know, some way to stop
So
people in
I
it being
disagree.
invulnerable.
I think that there should be more NPC space in the game. I think that will
Oh no, I
make
think more
things more
NPC space,
interesting.
but some way
I
to
don't think
defend against
you
the
shouldn't
hundreds of dreads you
the,
can stick in.
yeah, but why would you live in if you had that mechanic? Why would you live in NPC space? You might just take off because the whole point of NPC space is that players can live there and harass the local groups or whatever. If you make it so they can't do anything for like a certain amount of time, you just like it makes that pointless. Like I obviously there's no NPC in drones. There should be. We all know that, but I think I was gonna say like another big problem, and I think maybe Mario will agree, is like there are no groups in the game. There's no leaders in the game that want to take stuff anymore.
Yeah.
There's just like and that is an issue with the current state of the game, is that there's a drain of FCs and leaders that actually have the time, like the members or like the influence in groups and stuff, and want to do it. And the problem is that as soon as you get involved in nullsec, as soon as you take sov, as soon as you take a region or whatever, like you're now gonna get dragged into the politics of EVE Online, one way or
You get a
another.
target on your back.
Either you're new kid in the block, and everyone's gonna want you for content, and then you'll either
Yep.
have to choose a side or leave. And to answer your question, like why, Delve is free right now. Question, whatever. I could take Volta there. We could take some Sov and stuff, but owning Sov is like stressful. It's like a lot of work, and if you don't have a big one, like a lot of group, you either do it really small and fly under the radar, so no one actually, you're too small to even bother. No one get a fight, or you stay that size, but that's not how it works. Like you get bigger, and you grow and you grow, and it happens. Throughout EVE Online's history, there's been groups that rise and fall, in different parts of the game. But I feel like that hasn't happened for a while now. And I think whoever takes Delve, and I just think Initiative will take it, to be honest. That's my thing. I just
Do you
think it's
want to
going
live
take
on
it. 'Cause
Darkshine's doorstep? I mean,
no, but no one wants. Who wants to live? Who will want to take Delve? And if you
But
take Delve, you're sandwiched between Imperium and Initiative anyway.
well, the one thing
And
I
then
will
it's
say about the Imperium, and we have shown it with the smaller groups that live near us, we don't do what other groups do and use the stick to get people to fuck off. If we want their space, we'll just be like, hey, here's a deal. We won't evict somebody that's not actually hostile to us.
Do you just say,
Unlike,
here's a deal?
here's a deal,
Yeah,
yes,
what happens if they
diplomatic.
don't
Here's the
take the
deal.
deal?
Then
No, they make
normally
the
our
deal.
dip
Right
players will
there.
be like,
That's
okay.
the issue. That's the problem.
When was the last time
the
Goonswarm forcibly evicted a small group not PAM-FAM aligned?
Somebody in chat said they got evicted by goons.
Well, it's
Dark
happened
Knight
in the
said.
past. I'm not saying it's never happened. I'm just saying recently it doesn't.
Didn't Goons help clear out Scan's Stackhand?
What, the people
pretty
that
sure you guys were backing
promptly
up.
bent the knee to goblins?
They were independent until they
But
got blocked.
Asking Horde for help.
guys. We're looking at the forest from the trees right now. Basically, what's happening here is that there is no independent groups, right? Like everyone's saying that you have to be aligned this way or that way. An independent group that starts attacking anyone else's SOV is going to get obliterated. It doesn't matter if they don't want to sign any treaties, it's irrelevant. Any group that decides to move into Delve, Quarius from now on is going to have to then pick a side. The problem is that groups have to pick a side. They cannot be independent if they want to exist. A good phrasing, the way that I like to say it, how I communicate to CCP is that when you're a mid-scale group and you take Sov, a timer goes on. And there's a timer till you get evicted, or you have to pick a size and sell your soul to a block. That's it.
Yep.
There is no existence. And so this is like highlights the core issue is that how do we get FCs in leadership that want to go into null? We have multiple low sec alliances that are like for example, it's a Big Ab, Mimitar Fleet Alliance Edition, even smaller low sec alliances that could very well take Sov, but they don't because they know they have to sell something, and they don't want to do it, so they stay in low sec. And that at the end of the day, you have to side with one or the other groups. So the question is, how do we get to the point where you don't have to sell part of your arm or your leg?
Somebody
Puke,
said in chat. Go ahead, man.
Yeah, Puke, I don't mind that timer exists. It really is just the burnout going along through the timer is what kept us
Exactly.
out of nullsec. I don't mind that Hobos is going to get evicted every time we go out there. We're not going to align with people, and we're just going to get kicked out. But it's
Same.
having fun along the way that matters to us.
The timer exists, and that's fine. Look, BT tried to be independent, and we realized that we had to grow really fast to keep our own diplomacy, right? But I still, and this is the problem, is I still had to juggle Imperium and PanFam and Winterco to try and no, not Winterco because we were at war with them, but I had to really juggle Horde and Goons to to keep them out of our conflict with Fraternity. But obviously both sides are you've got to whose side are you on? Which side are you on?
Yeah, from a Goon FC point of view, I mean, we were straight up told that we don't turn up unless orders. We were leaving, it's like a...
But that is like, oh god. See, the thing is like, once it's just a staircasing for escalation that would inherently, unfortunately, I'd rather just die without anyone with Horde just blobbing us and you guys not showing up.
My
'Cause,
personal
the
opinion
same thing
on
with
you
Bishop, though.
guys trying to live up there was you were out of the way. That area was out of the way. There was no need for Fat to attack you at all. Not a need in the world, but they did.
Well, he told me he didn't want Declan and Fade, but I won't get into the politics of how that went down. But what I want to talk about is how you go from taking a couple of constellations to building an alliance, and at some point after like a year, groups start to notice that you're starting to form 200 people in an ETZ, and you start, strength invites strength, right? And then that's the point. That's when the timer runs out. It's like you go from doing the small gang stuff, the mid stuff like Murray, sub 100, and no one really cares. And then there's a couple of fights here and there, but you get to the point where it's like, oh, now you're on the big playing field, and now you have to pick a side. You have to pick a side.
And I think we talk about all this, and in the chat has said this a few times, and I know there's been a lot of talk there. You can't change the mechanics because it's human nature, and I think some of this has to do with the psychology of I need to protect my group. There's another group that's growing really quickly, sort of like B2. I need to get them out of there because they might make me feel threatened. But what we can do from a mechanics standpoint is those mechanics exist. But if you did something like make projection harder, does B2 become a threat when they grow in that region? And they're a regional power who can't project across to the other side of the space and become like a superpower, quote unquote, goons, horde, frat, that kind of thing. And then you just make it harder and inhibit that nature of, well, I don't need to go over there. They're really not a threat to me anymore. And you create barriers and that kind of thing. And that's really what I think this discussion is on, is yes, it's human nature. Yes, that's what you're going to do. Yes, we're PvPers. We're going to try to make each other's lives miserable because that's what we do in this game. But we can make it harder. We can, when there's a low sec fight, make sure that the entirety of Eve doesn't show up because nothing else is going on. We can make it so when a group takes its region, maybe it makes it a little bit harder for someone to go like, hey, I'm going to go over there, or they're not feel so threatened by that group being there, whatever it may be. So
The way
One
if
last. Go ahead,
the
Murray.
way I really like to phrase that when I talk to people is I consider a lot of mechanics as effort barriers, right?
Exactly,
So
100%.
what is the effort barrier to someone doing something? If I took 2 constellations in pure blind right now, what is the barrier that stops Frat from kicking me out because they just don't like my face? In like wormholes, the barrier is that Frat has to scan themselves in and find a way to get the fleet in, and they can't be bothered. For that space, the barrier would be that Frat can never justify deploying their entire alliance for a group of 70 dudes. That's not going to fly at leadership, that's not good content, it's a waste of everyone's time. So the only way they can kick me out is by walking fleets there. And if the act of walking fleets there enough times to actually evict me is not that hard, then they'll do it. But if every time Frat leaves from HTAC, whatever it is, every time they
H4.
leave from their capital, it takes 45 minutes for the fleet to get to my constellation in pure blind because they can't use jump bridges, they have to gate. So I can waterboard them the whole way, and they're crying. And after this 3.5 hour fleet, every line member is like, this is garbage. I'm never doing this ever again. That is the effort barrier I can use to have my little slice of space against large blocks. Because me being in pure blind doesn't threaten them strategically. It doesn't matter. But the way I keep them from bothering me is saying, if you're going to try and actually kick me out, I'm going to make it so painful for you to do so that you want to go do something else.
But when you get
Why
a
does
big
Frat
alliance, you're gonna have less fatigue because there's more people.
Why does Frat not like you, Murray?
Who's to say?
They don't like anyone.
I think that it's good that Delve's going to be vacuums invite groups to take places, which is good. I just think that
Yeah.
if for example in the war in the north, if Horde could not use Frats JBs for some reason, mechanically or whatever, I reckon it would have been a different outcome, that whole conflict.
The effort barrier would have been too high. They wouldn't
Because
have bothered because line
yeah,
members would stop showing up if the fleets were 4 hours long.
but then they would have to, the Horde would have to actually deploy to actually fight us. Like BFL were there, and that was fine, and they were fully deployed in pure blind, and that's okay, and that's fair game. They were deployed into NPC, and that's fine, and we're okay fighting them. The problem is like we could fight them, but they could bring Horde at any point, you know. And if Horde couldn't get to there, then it would have been different. But I think that I'm hoping that groups move into Delve and try nullsec, and I just hope that there are no deals from groups. Just let people live there and grow and become a regional power. That's what needs to happen.
I have one last question for the group here. And I want to spend a little bit of time talking about this. And I'm gonna steal Puke's phrase here. If you had a magic wand and you can fix anything in EVE Online right now, what would you fix?
Projection.
Projection.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been saying Ansiblexes should have fatigue for like 4 years at this point, 5 years, so I'm pretty locked in at this point.
Yeah, locked in on the projection. Got it. So I mean,
If you address projection, then medium-sized groups, small groups can get into a conflict, a local conflict. This game needs more local conflicts. You know, go back 10 years and there was so much things going on in the game. There's so many different fights happening. There's so many different groups fighting. There's so much more going on than just like one big conflict. I think that's what's fundamentally missing from the current state of EVE Online in the nullsec sphere. Not in lowsec. I'm not going to talk about lowsec and stuff because there is little things going on there. But in nullsec, there's no like regional conflicts happening between different alliances. There's none of that's happening anymore, and it's really sad because it was much more interesting, and you could have much more interesting gameplay, much more interesting fights, more groups getting involved on a local basis. Like even like when Proviblock was a thing, it was great. Like a little regional power that were like independent on their own, and they just did their own little thing, and you could go and fight them and have a little fight, Or when it was before us in the north, there was some groups there that another regional group that you could go and fight. There was all these little groups that you could actually go and like like Rote could go and like get some nice little fights on it, because maybe the bigger groups are all fighting each other or they're doing other things. Like the problem is like there's just only one every year or two. I think everyone's noticing now is like there's just like one major conflict every 2 years that just happens, and it's just like a timer. So this one will be done, and then everyone will wait for like a year. Everyone will build up, and then a year and a bit there'll be another one, and that's it.
Feels staged, right? Like it feels like
No, it's not
just
staged.
planned, right?
It's because
I know it's not, but
because nullsec is run on narratives, and it's run on a purpose. Groups need a purpose to exist. The blocks need purpose. Like Imperium have their purpose and Horde have their purpose. Their purpose is to annihilate each other. And Asher, obviously strategically wanting to move Imperium to where it is now because there's less NPC space, especially like further down in the southeast. So it's like more secure. But also because he needs to have a narrative to keep his leadership in check, keep his members on their toes, mobilize his members to like get them focused on PvP, and obviously then Horde will sit back and let this all happen, and then potentially they might go, well actually let's try and take those, maybe do something else and take this off. He'll need his own narrative probably in a year's time, or maybe 6 months to a year, to like rally his troops together to do something, and the same with Fraternity as well.
My hot take
Yeah, I
is
mean,
that Goons have realized that Drone Lands is the best space in the game for a block by a significant margin, and they said we want that, but we'll see.
I don't think
here
we're
for the
moving to
hot takes,
drones.
Murray.
Like I know
Well,
the other day
we'll
I said
see
I
if-
don't think we'd move from
Welcome to your new home,
UALX,
Dave.
but I don't think we'd move into drones. Just because we've moved twice in the last year. Now I think any more than that is gonna cause tension.
CTP's number one, in my opinion, their number one thing should be how do we break up nullsec. That should be their number one thing,
Move it
because
further
we are.
apart.
No, I don't think it should be bigger. I think the game is big enough in nullsec. I think that's fine. I think we need to somehow devolve groups somehow, because we are on the way to Serenity and everyone's scared of that. No one wants to end up like Serenity, but
I think
it's the initiative,
Ugh.
initiative, and Fraternity and Horde and Imperium becoming semi. They're not. I mean, Fraternity are still kind of friends of Horde, but like they've sort of separated themselves a tiny bit, decoupling a tiny bit. Same with Initiative and Imperium, but it's not fully complete. Those relationships are still there, like you said. Keith, it's a human nature as well. It's that sort of like where you build these bonds over 10 years and they're really hard to break. Time will fix that, but how much time do we have for that? That's the
perfectly.
question.
What would you do to break them up? Because, like, for example, some arguments I hear is like, oh, blocks are too big to fail. So how do you make them fallible?
How do you make them failable?
Yeah. So like
I
how
mean,
like you're saying you're saying that we need to break them up. How do you like just like a bank, right? How do you do it? In your eyes, what would you do?
If
I think it's incredibly difficult because these organizations are huge, right? It's super hard to break up people that have now gotten this ingrained narrative in there through propaganda and posting and whatever on Reddit that they hate the other side as well. Like it becomes this, people saying in chat it's like A versus B, and I think I don't want to be pessimistic and say it's like too far gone. Like obviously if something crazy happened and like Asher left the game and there was no other leader, but there will always be another leader for either group. I think it has to come from the players themselves to want to do
So-
that. That's the problem.
So
Well,
one of the core components, I will say, that I think ties very well to projection itself, is that quite simply, it shouldn't be possible to provide enough content for 5,000 characters worth of people staged in a single system in the center of 3 regions of blue space, right? Like if I have to go 20 jumps in any direction to reach space that isn't blue, it should be impossible for me to keep 5,000 characters worth of people interested in playing the game. And that's not that they're going to quit, but what they're going to do is they're going to say, hey, I'm not having fun here. You guys don't run any PvP or roaming fleets. So I'm going to go somewhere else. I'm going to join a different group.
You say
And
that, but
if the small groups are having fun and the big group is not having fun, you'll start to see the large groups have to make a choice between being geographically compact, taking on more risk in order to get their members' content, and being geographically sped and being very safe, but having no content.
But there's also the
But
issue with that big groups will just do it themselves and make smaller groups within themselves. Like Goonswarm 6. Yes, it may take ages for us to get from CTAT J now to whatever the hell. It won't, but that's the example. But we'll send BFL or we'll send Whelp Squad or someone off somewhere else. They'll set their Death Cleanse there and live out of that place like Uamon and have the fun there. Like, making it harder for a main fleet to move isn't going to solve that problem.
but
But
that's the complete answer, like, of what they've shifted towards, is just making SIGs to do things in the game, and then both groups do SIGs around the game, which is a really bad thing, obviously.
Oh, I
But
agree. I like
you
the
can't,
idea of smaller groups personally.
But
you
even what
can't,
Starfleet said, right? He could fight BFL. He just couldn't fight BFL when Horde was also able to show up.
I mean, Goons BFL, but yeah, no, I get your point with that. But it's still that point. I mean, yes, stopping the main fleets from getting to them will help that, but then you've got the said alliance will just then make a SIG that's got enough people in to fight you, like Horde and stuff.
I think really what I hear at the end of the day is with the blocks, can you break them up? I don't know necessarily if you break them up, but I think in a sense, can you contain them? And rather than blocks seeing the answer as building wide instead of trying to build tall, maybe is a better answer for that. Because I think there's a lot of null mechanics right now that encourage them to spread out. And then try to bring them back closer together, making projection harder, and then open up more of nullsec to some of the smaller mid-sized groups and allow them to compete. Because again, if you build tall and you only have to have 3 or 4 systems instead, whatever it may be, it's more conducive for a smaller group to live. Really what this comes down to, what I'm hearing, and everybody here is aligned with this, is that projection seems to be finding a way to nerf that projection, whether it's, jump fatigue on ANSYs, whether it's removing ACLs on Ansiblexes, whatever it seems to be. That seems to be the answer, the magic wand that we're looking for, that this group today thinks that we can solve all of Eve's problems. Now, I know we could probably spend another probably hour, 2 hours going through and really breaking down the issues and everything at hand today. But in the interest of everybody's time, I'm going to hand it off to Dave here to take us out today.
Yeah. So, well, first of all, let's go around the table and get some final thoughts. So, we'll start. I'm going to go with the order I've got on my screen. So we'll start with Young Puke.
No, guys, I just want to say again, and for all the people in chat, viewers too, thank you so much, guys. This is the third one. We submit these to CCP. We talk about it on CSM, and we talk about the topics. Every month, we're gonna have a different group next month, and these have been extremely productive. Like our first talk, we've had surgical strike changes come through, and a lot of other changes as well. Um, and I really appreciate Starfleet, Master Glorfleet, and Murray that you guys came on. And I think it'd be wonderful to see and have a day where Volta has space again, where Hobos has space again, where Rote has space again. And that is hopefully the direction it will be hopefully heading in. So
Okay, Starfleet.
Well, yeah, thanks for having me on. Obviously, thanks for the invitation. I will sign off with what I think, a couple of things that I'd say. So I think, yeah, projection is number one thing that CSP should be thinking about. Subcapital and capital balance should be the next in terms of escalation. Really thinking about, especially like carriers roles, faxes roles in nullsec as well, and then obviously how to somehow devolve the larger alliances in the game. That's those are the things that I think, the top 3 things for me.
Yeah. And for me, I will say, we've talked negatively a lot. There are a lot of things that I think are very good right now. Most of the building blocks are in place. Sov is worth having. The ship balance, capital and subcapital, I think is the best it's been in a decade, and it's not close. And so for me, projection is that last missing block in kind of the list of things that needed to be fixed. 3 years ago, that list was very long. It is shortened dramatically, and we're quite close to the point where the game's going to be in a really good spot.
Okay, Master.
Yeah, thanks for having us, guys. Really fun discussion, and definitely agree with the rest of the table when it comes to projection. And on that positive note, I think I'm really looking forward to getting back to the game sooner rather than later.
Keith, almost called you by your name.
It's okay. I mean, it's whatever.
Yeah,
Just
okay.
dox me on air today, Dave. Like, appreciate it.
I'm so
No.
used to it.
I mean, yeah, no. I mean, I love the conversation in the group here. I'm a little biased away from the big block idea. My roots started out with a lot of the smaller groups. I seem to be in line with that. But as I've been in Goons for a little bit longer, I definitely have seen the challenges to empire building. Someone in chat today said that's kind of the premise that CCP has built this game on, is the ability for us to go out and build something great. I think the problem we're trying to solve here is opening this up to allowing, it is a game at the end of the day. This isn't real life. Giving everybody a little piece of that sandbox to build their own little castle and it not get kicked down every 30 seconds, right? Is giving everybody that opportunity to go out there and pursue that dream and making it real. So I hope that these roundtable discussions help Eve form the game and continue to evolve and change a game that's been around for 10 plus years now. Thank you.
So I just responded to somebody on Discord there. Yeah, and basically for me is just stuff about the show. Next week we'll do a show on the move and the war, and I'm in talks with somebody that I will need to smuggle out of Dronelands for the show that you would least expect to be on a civil talk show with me, to come on and give the other side of the coin's opinion on the matter. But it depends whether they're free and whether somebody yanks his chain when they find out. But so next week should be spicy. Tune in for that. Other than that, a few housekeeping things. Iron End's recruiting producers, streamers, breaking news streamers. Check out our website for that. And check out our other content we have going on. Other than that, that is all for me. And goodbye.